Warning: the contents of this video may be disturbing for some people. Listeners' discretion is advised. As I write from my cell, I just want to make two things perfectly clear. I don't regret a fucking thing that I did, and Vivian is the light of my life. Ever since I held her little body in my hands, nothing else in the world mattered to me. I watched her grow, get sick, get better, and before I knew it, she was 5 years old. Time, especially as you get older, can be a bastard. Just when you think you're taking in every moment as a parent, they're already talking. I could go on, but you get my point. Vivian was eating an apple one day while at school, and it evidently snapped off inside of it. She was pretty mortified about it, but I reassured her that losing teeth was natural. She brought it home, and I told her that she'd see the tooth fairy. She, of course, asked questions, and I told her the whole table, and saw the smile appear on her face. She was ecstatic, and that night she could hardly wait to go to sleep. Around midnight, I snuck to her room and saw that she was passed out on her bed. Her body was sprawled across the sheets like roadkill. It was a sight that always made me smile. She was always a little goofball. I lifted up the sheets to place a dollar bill under there and retrieved the tooth, but when I looked underneath, something was already there. A silver dollar, bright and shiny too. I felt odd because I don't remember my wife Susie telling me that she would be playing Tooth Fairy tonight, and I most definitely didn't remember us having any sort of silver dollars lying around. But I just backed away and snuck out of the room. The whole thing was weird. I returned to bed and fell asleep next to Susie. The shrieks of excitement woke us up, and Susie gave me a wink in bed. "Good job, Tooth Fairy." I rubbed the sleepers from my eyes and said, "I thought you put something under her bed last night." I went in there and there was a silver dollar under her pillow. She looked at me with concern and sat up, her curly hair like a nest of spiderwebs on top of her head. "No, that's not funny. I'm not joking, I swear." Before we could say any more, Vivian burst into the room, holding up the silver dollar like it was a medal at the Olympics. "Look at it," she yelled. "Just look at it. Mr. Tooth Fairy treated me really well." We forgot what we were talking about and just congratulated her, and she ran into bed, showing us the silver dollar. It was hefty, shiny, and the more we looked at it, the more it seemed like an antique. The dollar itself was dated 1923. My wife was brushing Vivian's hair, getting all the knots out, when she asked, "Sure was nice of her to give you that." After she spoke, she shot me a worried glance, but before I could interject, Vivian spoke up saying, "Not her, Mommy. Mr. Tooth Fairy is a he." She kept brushing and looked at me again with amused, wide eyes like I had been caught. "Oh, really? And what does Mr. Tooth Fairy look like?" I was waiting for her to describe a 5'5", slightly chubby guy with black curly hair. I wasn't known for being a good sneaker in school. I was practically helpless during hide and seek, so I listened as she described him. "He's pretty tall. He's old, a little big, and he's got long gray hair. But he was really nice." My arms prickled with goosebumps as my wife looked at me with a nervous stare. "Yeah?" she asked. "Did he give you the silver dollar?" "Mm-hmm," Vivian said so nonchalantly. What did he wear? Did he have wings?" "Don't be silly, Mommy. Mr. Tooth Fairy doesn't have wings. He wears clothes." "What kind of clothes?" Vivian shrugged. "Normal clothes.
I guess, but he didn't have shoes on. He's funny.
I finally chimed in. Kiddo, are you sure this was the Tooth Fairy? Or did you have some sort of dream about this man while the real Tooth Fairy took your tooth? She looked angry at me and pulled her hair away from Susie. We both looked at her with a confused, frightened expression. Susie asked,
Baby, what's wrong? Daddy doesn't believe me.
I got out of bed, my legs popping as I did so, and said, Honey, I believe you. I just think you've got the Tooth Fairy mixed up with something else. Vivian got angry and stomped with her little foot onto the hardwood floor like an act of immature defiance.
Mr. Tooth Fairy is real. He kissed me goodnight before bed.
And then she stormed out of the room. To say I was speechless was an understatement. Susie turned to me and said,
What the fuck, Noel?
Susie, are you sure you?
I'm pretty fucking sure. What the fuck is going on? I don't know what the fuck was that. Where the fuck does someone find silver dollars like that? And aren't they like discontinued or something? Jesus Christ, no, what?
Hey now, calm down. This next part was a lie, but it was a comforting lie that made both me and Susie sleep better. I said, it's most likely an imaginary friend. Some kids have weird, creepy, and vivid, overactive imaginations. Maybe this is just one of them, okay? She nodded as I pulled her in for a hug. I whispered to her, It'll be fine. We're fine. We all converged in the kitchen to have breakfast before she was sent to school. I was having toast with raspberry jam. Susie had apple butter on toast, and Vivian had Fruity Pebbles. She ate as she stared at that silver dollar with reverence. That old coin meant the world to her, and if it did, why would I take it from her? I don't know how it got there or why, but I chalked it up to misremembering. As for Mr. Tooth Fairy, I just thought that it was just her imagination blended in with her reality. Maybe I was Mr. Tooth Fairy and just didn't know it. The bus showed up, and she waved to us from the windows as it sped down the foggy morning on our road. Susie left for the hospital. She was an ER nurse, and today she'd be running the long shift. I assured her that I'd keep the house spotless while she was away, and make her something special for when she gets back. I was a stay-at-home dad, but it didn't mean that I was jobless. I work from home virtually for a firm. I mostly work in boring shit that pays really, really well. After I got some work done, I cleaned the kitchen, made the beds, and went back to Vivian's room and looked around to make sure that I wasn't losing it. Her room was like any other 5-year-old's, which is to say, messy. Scattered teddy bears strung around, along with bits of old clothes she forgot to throw into her clothes hamper. As I was picking up, I looked next to the window by her bedside and pulled back the curtains. The light came into the room and lit up the whole room. But as I was about to leave, my bare feet touched something gritty beneath them. I looked down to see a pair of dried, muddy footprints next to my daughter's bed. I felt sick, and I tried to think about everything rationally. I felt for the window, and it was locked. Unless someone waltzed in from the front door, how the hell did someone get into Vivian's room? Call it denial, call it rationalization, but I just kept justifying what I was saying by thinking that maybe it was all me. I like to walk barefoot at home. Who's to say that maybe I walked to get the newspaper outside and brought dirt back in before putting something under her pillow? But what about the silver dollar? That was something I couldn't explain. The rest of the day went by fast afterwards. Everyone came home, and it was all pleasant. As the day went on, it was like what had happened this morning was nothing more than an afterthought. Everyone was happy and healthy, and I could ask no more than that. Another night passed, and we woke up and went through the motions of getting ready for the day. As I sipped some coffee at the kitchen table, I waited for my daughter to come in and get some breakfast. When she emerged from her room, her lips were covered in a dried, rust-colored smear.
Daddy, my mouth hurts.
I dropped everything and ran to her. Open your mouth, honey. When she did, spittle and blood dribbled out. I looked to the back of her mouth and saw a raw, bloody spot where one of her molars used to be. Susie turned around from the stove and asked,
What's going on?
"She lost another tooth." "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Give me some tissue paper." She handed me a fistful as I stuffed them in her mouth. "We'll change these out before you go to school. If you need any more, ask the nurse." "Did you swallow your tooth in your sleep?" Vivian didn't answer. She just nodded in silence, like she was ashamed. Susie and I gave each other a knowing glance. This didn't sound right, and it didn't sit right with us. But we didn't want to interrogate her right before school and become a blubbering mess when the bus would eventually arrive in front of the house. The bus came, and my wife was donning her scrubs for the day. As she was double checking to make sure that she had everything, I asked her, "What do we do about the tooth, huh? Do we tell a dentist or a doctor about it? I've never swallowed a tooth before." She sighed. "Nothing. It just passes through you. Want me to be the tooth fairy and put something under her pillow before she gets back?" "Oh, you mean Mr. Tooth Fairy?" "Right, almost forgot." I kissed her and told her to have a good day at work. I went back into the house and went through the rounds again, pulled out my laptop and worked for hours until my eyes stung. I got up and cleaned up the kitchen and then made our beds. Then I went into Vivian's room and saw how much she bled onto that pillow. It was a small, dark brown stain that was almost an oblong oval, apart from the roughened edges from where she probably stirred. "Good God," I said. I went to work, stripped the sheets, and got to taking the pillows out of their cases. Yet, when I lifted up the pillow, I saw another silver dollar. It was polished, practically spotless, and it was just staring at me. I was just utterly in shock. How the hell did this happen? Who was doing this? As I stuffed everything into the washer, I took my keys and drove to the nearest Walmart to grab a cheap hidden camera. I stalked the aisles endlessly until an employee asked about what I needed. I simply said, "My daughter is sleepwalking." A lie, sure, but there was no harm in it. The man scratched his head and looked over the selection in the electronics. Oh, this one would do quite nicely." He was a tall guy, and he reached up and got a baby monitor for me. No stepladder needed. His pudgy face smirked at me and said, "This'll do the job. 180p resolution, Wi-Fi accessibility, and you can watch the footage from your phone. Trust me, it's easier than it looks." "And the price?" "Oh, it's nothing, especially in today's economy. $50, even plus tax." "Not bad. I'll ring you up if you're ready." I walked over to the electronic section's register as he punched in the price. I forked over my credit card and paid for it right then and there. I pulled up my phone to check the time. I wanted to get back early enough to set up the camera and make dinner. My nerves were shot to shit, and I was just so over this whole thing. I just wanted everything to go back to normal. Evidently, I can't mask my emotions well, because the next thing I know, this leaned over and asked me, "Everything all right?" I looked up and saw that he was looking very concerned, but I just waved him away. "Just some personal things." He looked at me, and I could tell it was out of pity. He nodded to himself and said, "Tell you what, I'll give you 50% off on me." "Sir, you don't have to." I want to do this. You're clearly going through some shit." I didn't know what to say, and I just went with it. "Thanks." "You have a good one. I'll be praying for you." I returned home and quickly set up the baby monitor. I set it up in the corner of her room and buried it in plush toys and crumpled up blankets. After that, I configured it to my phone, and before I knew it, I got my camera feed up. Unfortunately, that's all it was. There was no motion detection, and I just had to watch the feed. I knew it was cheap for a damn reason. I shouldn't have let that employee talk me into getting it, but it was too late to go back and swap it out for something more high tech. I ran back to the kitchen to get supper started, and before I knew it, the bus was pulling up to bring Vivian back. I still had the silver dollar from under her pillow in my pocket. She opened the door and tossed her backpack onto the couch. She ran to give me a hug, and I hugged her back. How was school?
We learned about photosynthesis in science.
Aren't you a little young for your kids to be learning that?
Nah, we're big enough. We're not kindergartners.
Fair point. The coin was burning a hole in my pocket, and as I set the pasta to boil, I turned around to face her as she was coloring in pages in her coloring book. I withdrew the coin from my pocket and asked her, "Did Mr. Tooth Fairy come back last night?" She said nothing and continued to color. "Come on, Vivian, you're not in trouble." She stopped and looked at me with those two hurt eyes.
Yes.
My heart froze. I felt like raising my voice, but I kept it low and serious. "Honey, what happened?"
He came in and said my teeth were so nice that he wanted another tooth.
He what?
He just wanted another tooth, Daddy. I swear. Am I in trouble?
I felt gross making my daughter cry, but I needed answers. How does he get in? She jumped at me, raising my voice so suddenly as she began to cry.
I let him in. I'm sorry.
Her tears were falling, and I rushed to comfort her. She was in hysterics as she was snotting and sniffling in my arms. I just patted her back and told her, "It's okay, sweetie. It's okay." I warned her not to let anyone into her room anymore, especially Mr. Tooth Fairy. Susie returned looking exhausted, and she told me that it was a rough day. I told her about everything: the new silver dollar, the camera, and Vivian's confession to me. She just stared at me, nodding and taking in the news in droves. She just sat there with a depressed, glazed over expression. "Jesus," she whimpered. "What else?" That's everything." She leaned in and spoke softly and quietly so that our daughter couldn't hear us. "If this man comes back tonight, shoot him." I had a revolver under the bed in the safe, and I hadn't touched it since I bought it. I asked her, "Why not just call the police?" "No. If this man lays a fucking finger on her, you fucking end him." I didn't say anything back. I just nodded and left it at that. I finished cooking and served everyone fettuccine alfredo. What should have been a welcoming family dinner was nothing but uncomfortably quiet. We watched TV, I helped her with her homework, and we all went to bed. I grabbed the gun safe from beneath the bed and pressed the 5-digit code in. When it opened, I saw a revolver untouched by time. I opened the cylinder and saw it was still loaded. When I went to bed, my wife fell asleep, and through the baby monitor, I saw Vivian drift into sleep. The camera worked like a charm, and I set it to record overnight. Let it be known that I fought sleep for hours. I watched her until it was 3 in the morning, and when I couldn't open my eyes anymore, I just blacked out. I woke up and saw the morning light peering into the room, and my wife was still asleep. It wasn't even moments later when I heard my daughter start crying. Not a normal cry either. She was outright wailing. I sprung from the bed, gripped the revolver's handle, and rushed to her room. I flung the door open, and the window had been splintered at the bottom as someone forced it open. But then I see my little girl cupping her mouth, blood seeping through her fingers, and when she removed them to call out my name, I saw that all of her teeth were gone. There was nothing but blood-soaked gums. My wife came in after me, and she screamed at the sight of her baby. She ran to get something to stop the bleeding. I screamed at her, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I was terrified for her. What the fuck happened?
I thought he was nice.
I scooped her into my arms and wept for her. But as I did so, I heard the sound of metal clinking together behind her. I removed the pillow to reveal a sack of silver dollars, one for each tooth that was ripped out of her mouth. Susie's experience in the ER helped her prepare for situations like this. She took care of Vivian and knew exactly what to do. She called 911 to report the crime, but as she did so, I reviewed the footage. At 4:46 a.m., someone appeared in the window of my daughter's room and tapped on the glass. Vivian sat up in bed, and instead of letting him in, she shook her head at the silhouette. But the figure withdrew a crowbar and pried the window open. He crawled in, and Vivian was stunned, too scared to move. He wore a backpack and withdrew a bottle and a rag. He poured something into it and shoved it into her face. That bastard drugged her. From his backpack, he withdrew pliers and began to dig into her mouth. He took his time too. I could feel rage bubble up inside me with every tooth he ripped out. And for a brief second, the wooden floor of the house popped, and he looked around in panic, worried that he was going to get caught. And then I saw his face. My heart sank into my gut, and my legs felt weak. I dropped my phone, ripped the revolver, and shoved it into my pants pocket. Susie called out to me, asking me where I was going, and I told her that I was finishing it. I drove back to Walmart and ran to the electronics section. The man who sold me the camera was there behind the counter. His greasy, gray hair was tied into a ponytail, and he had dark circles under his eyes. His face lit up when he saw me. "You're back. Everything okay with your little girl?" I dropped the bag of silver dollars onto the counter with a thud. He looked down at the bag, and his eyes widened. He recognized the bag and then looked back at me. He didn't beg, and he didn't run. He just had the faintest of smiles on his face. I screamed at him and asked him, "Why her? You sick fuck!" The early customers of Walmart all drew their gaze toward us. With the calmest voice, he told me why. She had a beautiful smile. That was enough reason for me to end it. I took out the revolver and fired at this piece of shit's mouth. It knocked his teeth in, and blood rushed out. He had a look of shock, like he didn't expect me to do this. The prick must have thought he was untouchable. I put the next shot in his forehead and caved his skull in. People screamed and scattered from the area as he slumped backwards into the polished floors. The red blood oozed onto the white tiles as I hopped over the counter and unloaded the rest of the magazine into his head. His face wasn't even recognizable by the time I was done with him. I didn't leave the scene of the crime. I just waited for the police and sat my gun beside me. I wish I had more ammo. In the aftermath of it all, the police looked deeper into this creep and found hundreds of children's baby teeth stored in jars in his apartment. He'd been doing it here in town for years, and no one was the wiser for it. But he got sloppy. He used tips from a previous job to put money under children's pillows, but he ran out, and all he had left was his pathetic silver dollar collection. This audacious asshole believed he could get away with it. Well, not anymore. I don't suspect I'll be in here for much longer. I go to trial soon, and despite my case being classified as a murder, I think the judge and jury will understand my story. Susie called me yesterday and told me that the dentist said that Vivian's teeth will eventually grow in, but for now, she'll have to wear false teeth. I've got plenty of time to reflect, but I do not regret a thing that I did. This bastard had to die. He took her smile, and that I couldn't forgive.